I don't worry about Fernando Mendoza. I do worry about Fernando Mendoza to the Raiders because I said, find me the quarterback in the last 20 years that goes to a bottom-tier franchise and succeeds. And everybody goes, Joe Burrow. And I'm like, yeah, and he hasn't made the playoff 3 straight years. Like at some point, once they paid him, the roster's thin. Well, C.J. Stroud, and he has regressed in the last 2 years. I don't worry about Mendoza. I think he's Matt Ryan plus, and Matt Ryan was very good. But you, in your career in the NFL, I think the gap in locker rooms, travel, coaching, training is pretty broad. You have always talked about your good experiences on this show. Was there experience, or did you have teammates that talked about organizations that didn't have it buttoned up? And like, what did the story shock you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you go back to the controversy that was this NFLPA report card and the NFL kind of going at it in court and saying, hey, we don't like that. We don't want the players sort of grading the team. I mean, this is what you did back in the day with your cell phone. Right. What's it like where you are? Back when I played, it was things like nutrition and, some of those type of things. The one place I was, like I parked in the parking lot. By the time I pulled into my parking spot, the chef in the kitchen was already working on my veggie omelet. Like that's just how it went. Another team I was on, I'd come in the building, one of the first people there's an igloo cooler with 2-hour-old like breakfast sandwiches that were just sitting in there. You could grab one if you wanted. Like it just was like a different experience. Lunch was provided at one place, and another place it was you'd be in line at Subway with your coaches, like with your cleats on. It just was a totally different vibe. So wow. I do think there are certain teams that are cutting edge. They're ahead of the curve. They spend money to make money. They make it feel like this is not work. Like we're just having fun. We're at a family. It's contagious. And then, then there's other workplace environments that are not that way. But I think that the main thing that I would point to for success is, particularly like in my experience with, you mentioned the Packers and the Seahawks, like the football people were very much in charge. There was no owner coming in and saying like, hey, I went to this alma mater, I need to draft that player or something like that. Right. Which that can happen, throughout the NFL, where you basically aren't on the same page on draft, on free agency, on players you're going to keep, and some of those kinds of things. So not every team is the same that way.
Yeah.
I completely understand the perspective that Colin is articulating regarding those specific concerns. I genuinely do, because I frequently discuss the concept of well-managed organizations and the critical importance of organizational stability, structural competence, and front office coherence. Colin and I are very much aligned on that fundamental principle. We share the same philosophical foundation when it comes to evaluating how franchises should operate. However, I firmly disagree that this characterization applies to the Las Vegas Raiders. I sincerely believe it does not, and I am growing weary of continuously reiterating the same argument where I find myself explaining that they have actually made sound football decisions. Those decisions simply did not yield the desired results, and that outcome does not automatically invalidate the thought process behind them. But let us examine the Cincinnati Bengals comparison specifically, since Colin explicitly references them as a cautionary tale. Joe Burrow has encountered significant difficulty maintaining his health throughout his career. That is an undeniable reality, and a primary factor explaining why they have missed postseason contention in consecutive seasons. They failed to qualify for the playoffs 3 straight years. One season, injuries derailed them. The following season, Burrow performed at an elite level, but the defense was historically inept. The next year, injury struck again. That is the cyclical nature of their situation. The Bengals have essentially adhered to the same operational template throughout this period. They have exemplified the classic definition of organizational insanity, repeating the same patterns repeatedly while expecting different outcomes. That characterization does not accurately describe the Las Vegas Raiders' approach. It simply does not reflect their reality. The Raiders have consistently taken aggressive swings. They have implemented significant organizational changes. They have pursued high-profile coaching candidates. They have aggressively sought solutions at the quarterback position. They have demonstrated a willingness to be bold. They made a legitimate push to acquire Matthew Stafford. They pursued that aggressively. They actively courted Ben Johnson. They are attempting to execute the appropriate strategic maneuvers. If circumstances had aligned according to their preferences last season, they would likely have secured Ben Johnson as head coach and Matthew Stafford as quarterback. Would that combination have represented a poor decision? I struggle to see how anyone could reasonably argue that. Their most significant miscalculation was failing to acquire Sam Darnold. However, that outcome may ultimately benefit them, because now they will proceed with Geno Smith and Chip Kelly. That configuration presents exciting possibilities. There exists a substantial probability that Sam Darnold would have struggled in Las Vegas last season. Had that occurred, they would never have discovered what they truly possessed in their quarterback room. It would have been simply another miss. Public perception would likely have blamed Darnold more intensely. The narrative would have reinforced the notion that he cannot succeed without Justin Jefferson and Kevin O'Connell surrounding him. It is genuinely remarkable to contemplate how rapidly circumstances can shift and how quickly perceptions transform. And I suspect that is precisely how rapidly narratives will evolve regarding the Las Vegas Raiders. Before I delve deeper into this analysis, I must address the Raider Nation directly. Please ensure you subscribe to the channel and view the content in its entirety. When you invest that time, viewership metrics accelerate dramatically. Subscriber counts climb substantially. When you watch and simultaneously subscribe, everything trends vertically. I emphasize this point repeatedly because it reflects reality. This pursuit transcends merely chasing view counts or subscriber numbers. It concerns creating content that resonates authentically with audiences. Content that generates genuine discussion, enabling us to conduct honest, grounded, balanced conversations about the Las Vegas Raiders. That represents my true objective. That is what I am striving to construct. I genuinely believe the Raiders represent a franchise I will continue discussing extensively. I find it particularly intriguing that Colin is beginning to experience what I would characterize as hesitation regarding the Raiders, apprehension, uncertainty. Because I am convinced this organization will achieve greatness within the next few seasons. The Las Vegas Raiders will become a formidable force. I cannot predict with certainty the magnitude of their success in year one of this new regime. Forecasting outcomes for a first-year head coach and quarterback combination presents inherent difficulty. That complexity is undeniable. Observers can examine what various teams accomplished and draw comparisons, but accurate prediction remains elusive. Consider even the Washington Commanders and Jaden Daniels. Dan Quinn was not experiencing his first head coaching opportunity. He had previous experience leading teams. Cliff Kingsbury had coached extensively and possessed substantial experience. Numerous elements required alignment for their success. Several situations could easily have resulted in them missing playoff qualification entirely, if we are being intellectually honest. Remove the Hail Mary completion. Remove Jalen Hurts' injury during their matchup. Multiple scenarios existed where they might have fallen short of postseason participation, yet they qualified, proceeded to win multiple playoff games, and the narrative cemented accordingly. Every successful season, even for exceptional young quarterbacks, requires elements of fortune. Now Las Vegas introduces a young head coach, a veteran quarterback with something to prove, and numerous transitional elements. Many moving components require synchronization. Nevertheless, I feel this conviction deeply within myself. I'm expressing this position emphatically. I'm not occupying neutral territory. I'm being loud, firm, and unambiguous. I'm establishing my position with conviction, declaring my belief that the Las Vegas Raiders are trending appropriately. This explains why I appreciate Colin framing his concerns through the organizational lens rather than questioning Geno Smith's capabilities. He has previously expressed uncertainty about how effective Chip Kelly will be as a coach. That skepticism stems partially from Colin's developing attachment to Sam Darnold. He feels empowered by Darnold's resurgence. Consequently, there may be inclination to minimize Chip Kelly's potential impact. I am not engaging in that behavior. I maintained belief in Kelly's abilities during his transition from New Orleans to Seattle and expressed enthusiasm about Seattle's prospects accordingly. I am certainly going to maintain that enthusiasm now that Kelly joins Las Vegas with an opportunity to shape an offense around a quarterback he can mold according to his vision. I am equally excited about Geno Smith's presence. My confidence extends to the organizational direction. The franchise operates with greater competence than popular imagination suggests. I genuinely reject the narrative portraying them as dysfunctional. I acknowledge that external observation can sometimes reveal unusual dynamics. Ownership situations, organizational energy. I recognize these elements can project peculiar vibes. I am not denying or dismissing that perception. However, the current characterization paints them as comparable to the Bengals or New York Jets. I consider that assessment dramatically overstated. The Raiders represent something fundamentally different. Examine the decisions the Jets have made. They anointed Zach Wilson as their franchise quarterback. They selected a head coach widely regarded as unprepared for the role's demands. Their ownership intervenes in defensive personnel decisions. That environment reflects genuine dysfunction. Now examine the Raiders' approach. They pursued an established quarterback demonstrating recent success. They targeted an established head coach with historic career achievement. They brought in an experienced offensive coordinator. These represent sound football decisions. Once again, these moves absolutely did not succeed. That is indisputable. However, they were not inherently flawed decisions. They simply were not. They acquired Davante Adams through aggressive pursuit. They made concrete strategic moves that passed the logic test. They have executed impressive draft selections as well. The situation lacks the organizational chaos often attributed to it. They have simply failed to synthesize all components into cohesive success. They have made quality decisions that, unfortunately, did not materialize as intended. When you aggregate these factors, you encounter coaching transitions and organizational evolution. But consider the swing they took on Antonio Brown. If Brown had not experienced personal difficulties derailing his career, that acquisition would likely have generated substantial success alongside Derek Carr and John Gruden. The potential energy there was tremendous. They never received opportunity to actualize that potential. Josh Jacobs emerged as a foundational piece. I believe they experienced unfortunate timing with football circumstances. They encountered the mercy of football gods and happenstance. These things occur. Now, with Tom Brady's involvement adding another dimension, the trajectory appears increasingly positive. I am not suggesting Brady will micromanage daily operations. However, his presence influences organizational direction. Evaluate his football and business acumen however you wish regarding his personal life. That represents separate consideration. Regarding football operations specifically, I will trust his judgment until evidence suggests otherwise. That represents a reasonable approach. When examining the moves they pursued last season, the response was uniformly positive. Those represented excellent strategic plays. They simply could not execute them due to insufficient offering capacity. Completely understandable circumstances. Now they have secured what many consider the premier coaching acquisition and a quarterback with proven capabilities. If you cannot envision this organization positioning itself for continued progress, I suggest you are not examining the situation with sufficient clarity. You are allowing past outcomes, not past decisions, but actual results, to disproportionately influence your forward-looking projections. That represents a significant analytical error. That resembles watching Stephen Curry miss several three-point attempts and concluding those were poor shot selections simply because they missed, suggesting he should stop attempting three-pointers altogether. No. Those were correct shots taken by the appropriate player. The basketball simply failed to penetrate the net. You are over-indexing on outcomes rather than process. You are too narrowly focused. Expand your perspective. Those represent my reflections on this matter. I genuinely want to understand your perspective. What are your thoughts regarding the Las Vegas Raiders' capacity to support Geno Smith, Chip Kelly, and the surrounding organization? Do you fundamentally consider this a poorly managed franchise incapable of achieving sustainable success, regardless of coaching personnel or quarterback performance? Share your opinions in the comments section. I read every single comment without exception. Whether your viewpoint aligns with mine or diverges completely, either way, let us generate substantive discussions. Let us engage in spirited debate. Ultimately, let us ensure we derive enjoyment from this shared passion. Please consider subscribing to the channel. We are cultivating an exceptional community here, and I would genuinely appreciate your participation. I aim to construct something we all authentically feel connected to, something generating genuine excitement about belonging. I believe we are making meaningful progress toward that objective. Do not forget to indicate your approval through the like button. It genuinely enhances visibility and algorithmic reach. Thank you sincerely. I will connect with you in the subsequent video.